I'm Coffee Kevin, and I'm here today with Eivy Monroy, and she is with Finca Abarim. Any occasions where actual coffee producers came to CoffeeCon, you were one of the first, and I was very touched by it. I really always thought producers should be at a consumer event, what I called a farm stand relationship.
Thank you. It's also an honor to be today here at Final City talking to you directly, and also to be able to represent coffee producers in this occasion.
You're very welcome. Now, let's get to the heart of everything. Obviously, right now, the world is a very different place, and we're as far as I can tell, worldwide, we are dealing with the coronavirus, the same virus. And I'm curious, what is it? Colombia is where your farm is. What is it like there right now?
Yes, indeed, it has been a challenge for all of us, of course, across the world, and that's something that we just gotta move on and start thinking about how do we keep going. We started with crisis right at the same time as the United States. I remember perfectly that. And the government started to locking down the entire country, cities, municipalities, small towns, all businesses. So people had to stay in their houses and start adapting, adjusting to this change. Colombia, much like any other Latin America country, we are very social people. We are very, we like to hug, we like to kiss, and we like to socialize. And to all of the sudden, you have to stop that is a shock. We are continuing with our activities at the farm. So right now I'm going to speak specifically about my farm, Finca Abarim, in Colombia, in a town called Buena Vista, Quindío. Quindío is the department. And this is a very, very small town, and is very isolated, I should say, because it only has two roads that connects directly into the town, and it's sitting up in the hill overlooking the valley. So to be able to come into the town, you only have two main entrances. So due to the COVID-19, these entrances were completely blocked for entrance from people that that are not residents, so they're not able to come in the town, and people who want to go out to buy food or something like that, they have to go with a special permission, and it's a lot of restrictions. So, but for farmers, they are allowing us to continue working, and it turns out that it coincided with harvesting season. So Colombia has two main harvest seasons, and in Quindío, in the region where my farm is, the seasons are April and May, and also October and November. So right now, if the government, or for whatever reason, the farms will also have to shut down, that would have been devastating, because farms need to harvest the beans. They cannot let the beans to be hanging on the trees, because these are not like apples or oranges. They actually need to go to be harvested, because that is a high risk, not only a risk of losing our livelihood, but also a risk with certain disease like broca that takes advantage of the ripe beans to attack the bean.
When you say broca, you mean insects, right?
Yeah. So this is a very, very tiny insect. It's almost like a tick that bursts inside the bean and it starts eating inside the bean. So when we harvest it, and when we actually going to prepare all the beans for processing, then once you find the bean is extremely destroyed, and that this disqualifies the coffee beans for good quality. And this is a very, this is a very extreme disease or a plague that attacks all coffee farms across the world. So, and one of the best options to control that is by picking the right beans at the right time.
I hate to introduce my innate selfishness, but from a coffee lover's point of view, is it possible to get, is this really, how is it impacting? It sounds like we can't get any beans right now. Have I got that right?
You're getting that right to the extent of specialty coffee, right? To the extent of whether we are able to sell coffee, how far we can travel to sell our coffee, who can come inside the town or come to our farms to pick up the coffee to be able to, to continue moving the supply chain of the coffee. And as a matter of fact, right now, particularly my farm and our neighbors' farms who work extensively producing high quality specialty coffee, we on this harvest, we had to decide to take a step back and think about maybe while we will continue producing specialty coffee in the sense of the quality of the beans are extremely high. However, we are not utilizing additional resources that we will do otherwise to ensure the quality of the batch of coffee. So, for instance, in normal situations, when coffee has been harvested and has been brought to the compile center, we will hire a group of women who will be doing a hand selection, themselves. So making sure that all the best beans are selected, and that's what we call our specialty coffee, our coffee that comes from a micro lot, coffee that comes directly that have gone through approximately 3 different hand selection in this case. So this time we didn't do that. So we couldn't hire this group of women to do the selection because we're not going to be able to sell the coffee at the price that we would hope for, to cover the costs of that. In addition, we won't do additional fermentation time. Usually we'll be increasing the fermentation in our processing will be a little bit more, well prepared. So right now our approach due to COVID-19 is harvest, move the coffee, harvest, move the coffee out. And we are right now selling our coffee in town to one person that is buying the coffee pretty much from all the different farms, and he picks it up, he buys the coffee, and he takes it out. We don't know where he's taking this coffee, but all the batches are going into the same batch.
Not that many people perhaps know that selection, that reselecting and going through and choosing and separating the good from the great, and the great is what's left is those, as you say, micro lots. That's when people see that they can fair to say they can assume that that's the highest quality coffee is the number of pickings.
That's correct. Yes. As a matter of fact, that really influences a lot the cupping that you get from your coffee. If we don't do the selection, like for instance, the first selection comes from the processing, where beans that are floating, if it's a wash process, those are the ones that we call seconds. And then we don't discard them totally, but we sell them at a very low price. And that's the one that we don't want to be in our batch for specialty coffee. And then it comes the next selection, and then the selection of hand picking before it goes into drying. And then once you dry the coffee, we do sun-dry coffee, which basically means we have platforms where we put the coffee to dry on the environment. And this is good when we have sunny days, but it turns out the harvesting season also coincides with the winter time. I mean, the winter we call when it rains a lot. So it's very difficult also to ensure, that this drying goes fast. And so, and that goes another selection. And even when we are also basically moving to the next process before roasting, that is another selection as well. So my coffee goes through perhaps 5 different selections before it is roasted.
Wow.
So this is my team from Finca Abarim. They're right now in Buena Vista, Quindío, in Colombia. So right now, I'm going to introduce my husband, Jim Toby.
Boehner is the farm manager. He manages the work on the farm and all of the workers on the farm. Today we have 6 workers, and Boehner has been with us for 2 years, and he was only 19 years old when he took this position. It was his first job as what we call in Spanish, agregado, which is the person who manages the work on the farm and the workers. So he's the leader of all the work. And he's the personality that makes everything happen on the farm. And his wife, Yorani, is the person who we provide 3 meals a day on the farm for the workers. Breakfast is at 8 o'clock punctual, and lunch 8 o'clock. Lunch is at 12, and supper is at 4:30. And she not only cooks for no matter how many people we have working, sometimes 12, sometimes 3, and for me and for her family, and she keeps the house clean. So Jorani is very important to the farm family, and this is Heidi, their daughter, and this is Eliana. She's the niece, right? Sobrina, niece of Eivy, and has just moved to Buena Vista. Help us. She's managing a coffee house, a cafeteria that we recently opened. That right now is serving pizza because we're still in quarantine here in Buena Vista. Nobody can come into the pizzeria, but they call and we deliver. We've had up to 19 deliveries a night, which is pretty impressive considering that this restrictions have been extremely hard on everybody here because stores aren't open. Until this week, there's been no ability for construction workers to work. The only work really recently has been on farms because primary products production, the president has allowed to keep going because it's so important for everybody, including coffee. So we've been employing coffee workers the last 6-7 weeks, even though everything else has been totally quarantined. It's been a lot stricter here than in the US, for example. Travel and everything is totally shut off. And right now the priority is collecting coffee because when there's coffee, you have to harvest the coffee. So we're not doing much else. Every week we're harvesting coffee, and coffee in Colombia doesn't all ripen at the same time. It's a process of 4 weeks. So it's a period of a different period because when we harvest, we also have to process it the same day, wash it. So Lena will be working until 8 at night, almost every day, because you have to process the coffee the same day, and it has to be fermented in water for 18 hours or so, depending on the temperature, the climate, so that it removes the mucus under the shell, so that it can be then dried. This is the view. The mountains, these the Andes Mountains. It's volcanic in origin. This is a subtropical rainforest, and we are over a canyon at the bottom of which there's a stream. When it rains a lot, we can even hear it because it's so high. But what you're looking at on the other side is a lot of citrus that has been converted from coffee. All of that used to be coffee. Now it's citrus. And a lot. So what people change from coffee, they're switching to citrus, which is oranges or lemons, and avocados. The city you see down below is Caicedonia, and that's a different department. In Colombia, departments are like states, and there's 32 departments. Quindío, where we are, is the smallest department, just like Rhode Island is in the United States. And it's very funny because Buena Vista is the smallest municipality in the department. So we're the smallest community in the smallest department. We're only talking about 6,000 population here.
That was pretty cool. Thank you.
So you mentioned to me that organic coffee is not necessarily an option, and you mentioned some reasons why, due to the complexity of it.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin, for introducing that topic as well, because it has been an interesting approach for myself as well. I mentioned to you that I am an environmental engineer also, and of course, as an environmental engineer, we want everything to be completely, clean, let's say, put the word clean, but really it's not that. It's how can we continue with our lives in a sustainable way? And that's something that I have to learn over the years to understand that there is a balance, there is a balance in the universe that we need to be able to work with. And this is perfect example for coffee. I remember when we bought our farm, and I was working with our manager then. I say, hey, Julio, I want this farm to be organic. And he was like, what? And he's like, Eivy, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, I want to be organic, I want it to be extremely, all these things that I do here in my small vegetable garden. So pesticides and all of these are not affecting the tomatoes or the peppers. However, at the scale of my coffee, of a farm such as mine, that is considered even a small scale, it's a huge risk. It's huge because we still need to control the disease, the plague like Broca. And the only way we can do that is with people all the time harvesting it. And so he say, Eivy, we probably cannot go completely organic, but we will be able to go in a very sustainable management way. And I was like, exactly, perfect. That's what I want as well. So one of the reasons some people can grow organic coffee is because it depends on the size of the farm, and also influences a lot the altitude where your farm is. Even though my farm is a pretty good altitude, we could have a huge risk by going completely organic. Most of the coffee, at least in Colombia, that is organic, come from very, very high altitude mountains, especially the indigenous of the Tairona community. They grow organic coffee, and it's because the coffee is pretty high. However, when you are in a high altitude, you're compromising productivity because there's not as much sun and it's colder temperature, so you have less productivity as well.
It is critical that people, if they're going to pay the price for better specialty coffees, will be able to understand some of the complexities. And I there's nothing wrong with the consumer understanding these. I happen to like wine as well, and I've read a lot about wine over the years, and I'm hardly a vintner, but I certainly understand some of what a good winery deals with, and the same thing for coffee farms.
What it really struck me as an interesting experience on different workshops that I attended during CoffeeCon, where the demand from the consumer to learn about this. they were asking specific questions about processing, about what do you do with the skin of the coffee? What do you do with this? And surprisingly, a lot of the, not surprisingly, really, it was surprising for me, right? Because it was my first time on an event, and to see that the presenters who normally are from roasting companies, they didn't know how to answer these questions. And then I realized, oh, wow. So what do they know about us? Because that's the connection, that's how the consumer learns about what it takes to produce coffee, is through either the importer or through the roaster or through the cafe and the barista. And there is a huge disconnection between the coffee producer does to what the consumer knows about what we do. Not only what we do, but how much we make compared to what they pay for coffee.
I have a quick question. Fair trade versus direct trade, which do you prefer?
I think also through personal experience, I'm starting to learn about both of them, right? More so than what you read online, more so than what others tell you about it. And one personal experience was selling my own coffee. So I bring very small batches of my own roast coffee to sell here in the United States. And I remember people telling me, is your coffee fair trade? And I'm like, no. And they're like, oh, okay. So they kind of disregarded the coffee right away. Like they didn't even want to taste it. They didn't want to try it. They weren't even willing to pay $12 for an amazing batch of coffee that came directly from the farm, just because it didn't have the fair trade label. And to me, it was like, wait a minute. So I started working through the system, and I was like, okay, let me see. Maybe it's worth it to get a fair trade certification. We'll see how much it costs. And I started trying to, reach out to the organization. And the experience was not good, to be honest with you. It was almost sad. But in further, moving forward from that experience, I learned about direct trade as well, which means direct trade is not certification per se, is more of a mechanism of how the producer can find a different alternative to sell coffee directly to the roaster in either United States or any other high producer coffee country, such as any country in Europe or Australia or New Zealand. The interesting thing about those two is that on the direct trade, the roaster has that direct connection with the producer, right? They're the both who are setting up, how much you're willing to pay for the coffee of this particular farm, and how much coffee you have, the capacity, the quality, and everything that goes within that, within that spectrum. On fair trade, in my opinion, is a little bit hidden all of that information. And unfortunately for producers, it's not good, because we are the ones who have to pay for, one, the certification, two, for the farm to meet all of the requirements and the standards to be a fair trade farm. Three, a small farm is not eligible for being a fair trade certificate for coffee.
What's your favorite preparation of coffee when you really want to enjoy coffee?
Actually, I like drip coffee. But in the morning, making it really well, I use the AeroPress, the thing that you push. Yeah. I love it. I love it. Yes. Yeah, it's my favorite. we are hoping that the audience on this website, we're going to have the opportunity for people to sign up for an email. So when we have our coffee here in the United States, whether this is roasted, transformed, or green coffee, we will let you know. And through CoffeeCon, you will know that when this fantastic coffee, not only from my farm, but also from different farms in my community. That's our hope, to work with the community. And that is how we are going to thrive, because we need to work together, not only as producers, but as everybody who are in the value chain, the supply chain of coffee.
Thank you, Eivy. It's wonderful to have you, visit with us. And I'm a big fan of your coffee and of you, because I know how much you care, and you're just a fount of information for someone who is interested in every aspect of it. I can't think of anyone I'd rather share time with. So thank you.